Hello. Okay. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the input, guys. It is because of you that I could see that there was no sound, and I have refreshed it at my end, and hopefully now I am audible. So let's just quickly take it back by one slide. So what is IIFT? It's a really amazing college called Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, which was started in 1963. And they offer this flagship course. Let me just also look at it on YouTube. I'll be able to figure it out. So yep. What is IIFT? Yep, getting the sound now. So it was started in 1963 and they offer this flagship program called MBA in International Business. Apart from that, they also offer an MBA in Business Analytics. Remember those of you who are interested in big data? Okay. And then they have also recently started this program called IPM, which is an integrated program in management. This is basically a 5-year course which has 3 years of graduation and 2 years of MBA. So if you happen to have young ones in the family who are sure that they want to build a career in management, then they can actually start the journey right after 12th. Some of the IIMs offer it now, IIFT too. So you can look at that. And IIFT started off with just one campus here in Delhi, but then they gradually expanded to Kolkata, and now they're also in Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh, which is pretty close to the beaches. Okay, so I shouldn't even really push that as a selling point, but who does not love beaches? So this is what IIFT is all about. And another crucial question is, why should you really sit for the exam? Seriously, exams cost money, exams cost effort. So the answer is pretty simple. If you want to get into Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, then this is an exam that you should write. And in fact, if I look at it around last year around 21,000 people sat for this exam because they found it worth it. And I'm sure once you look at some of the relevant statistics, you will also think that this is an exam you should sit for, you should write. So here are those relevant statistics about the college. So see, this is something that most of you will perhaps be keen on. So the average package last year was a shade above 25 lakhs per annum. Even the median is 24, so you know that the average does not have a lot of bias. And if you are one of those better performing students in the college, now imagine, and that's what I generally say, that if you are joining a college, make sure to remain in the top 10%, and if you are one of those top 10%, the average actually shoots up significantly, right? And all of this at a fees of around 22 lakhs. So normally any college where the average CTC is higher than the fees charge, I am usually in a pretty safe situation to recommend it. So if this attracts you, then IIFT is definitely a college that you should apply to. And if you want to get into this college, you should of course go ahead and sit for this exam. And then the other question could be, why are we talking about it now? You know, we are focused on the CAT, and in fact, in a lot of our other sessions as well, we've repeatedly talked about CAT and, you know, let us get ready to write it on 26th of November. So why do we need to talk about IIFT? Why can't we, or why shouldn't we focus exclusively on the CAT? Well, the reason is pretty simple. We are talking about it right now because the exam is usually conducted just after the CAT. So if I look at the last year, the exam took place on 18th of December. A year prior to that, it happened in January. But then if you look at a couple of years prior to that, you typically see that this exam takes place in first week of December. So in 2020, it was conducted on 2nd December. A year prior to that, it was conducted on 1st December. So usually you are going to get somewhere between 1 to 2 weeks. And within those 1 to 2 weeks, you need to switch. You need to start focusing entirely, start focusing completely on the IIFT, and that short time period can actually be very challenging, especially considering this fact that the exam happens to be different from the CAT. So when I say different, how exactly is it going to be different? So let us look at the paper pattern first up. So the CAT has 3 sections, IIFT has 4. So here is a snapshot of the exam. So you notice 4 sections. Every section happens to have a different weightage. The normal marking scheme is +3 and -1. However, they happen to have a separate marking scheme for general awareness, where every question that you get right, you get +1.5. On the other hand, if you get these wrong, it is going to be -0.5. So still a third of the marks are going to be deducted. So overall, you had 110 questions leading to 300 marks. So for the last 2 years, this has been the pattern. However, if I look at the last 5 odd years, you should expect anywhere between 110 to 130 questions. But because they have essentially narrowed it down to 110 for the last couple of years, that makes me feel hopeful, feel optimistic that even this year we are likely to see the same pattern. And therefore, this is the pattern that we generally keep in mind when we talk about the paper pattern. And then, so if you look at the differences in isolation, so the exam is usually easier than the CAT, although last year DILR was a little on the tougher side. Then 110 questions versus 66 questions. Both of these are 2-hour exams. Although, as I've told you, it need not be 110 necessarily. It can go higher as well. Then there is no sectional time limit. So when we think of the CAT, I don't even look at it as one exam. I think of it as 3 40-minute exams that we are supposed to write back to back. On the other hand, when it comes to IIFT, you are free to go to any section, any question throughout those 2 hours. So you can decide on the order of sections. You can decide whether you want to switch between sections or among sections even during the course of those 2 hours, entirely up to you. That said, IIFT does have a sectional cutoff for each section. So you need to score a minimum number of marks. They usually correspond to around 40 percentile. And generally, I think 40 percentile is something that you can get in every section very easily. So sectional cutoffs are usually not a big deal, except for general awareness, where they can be a big deal for some of us, but they're usually for the other 3 sections not that big a deal. And then there is an addition of this entire new section called general awareness. I'm sure that is a section that you cannot really master in a couple of weeks, and therefore that is something that you need to start doing from today on. Okay, then let's talk about the individual sections and see how they are different. So first up, IIFT VARC section does have reading comprehension. In fact, for the last 2 years, we have received 4 passages with 4 questions each. So just like the CAT, 16 RC questions. But then the situation starts becoming different hereafter. So you also get grammar questions. So typically, in an average IIFT, you should get around 4 to 5 grammar questions, which essentially test your understanding across 2 areas. So you get questions that are based on error identification, and then questions that test your understanding of the basics of the grammar. Okay, so typically these questions dive into things like parts of speech, and then errors belong to areas like prepositions, tenses, pronouns, subject-verb agreement, more of your conventional grammar bit. Now the CAT has not asked us grammar in quite a while. IIFT does. So it means that you need to start working on grammar. Now for that matter, all the other management entrance exams except for the CAT would have grammar. So if you're serious about writing NMAT, SNAP, ZAT, TISNET, Maharashtra CET, CMAT, IIFT, grammar is one area that you should definitely be focusing on. So make sure that you start today. And if you're starting today, I would expect you to go through 8 to 10 pages of a grammar book every day. Until you've read that book twice. And after that, start writing a lot of mixed bag tests. And then apart from grammar, IIFT is notorious for its vocabulary based questions, and these questions cover a really wide range of areas. So here you go. So they can give you synonyms and antonyms. They can, and apart from English words, they can actually also use foreign expressions. Then they ask you a lot of one-word substitution questions. You have questions that are designed like a crossword, then they test your spellings. They also have questions that can test your understanding of root, prefix and suffix. So they may give you a root and then may ask for a word, or they may give you a word and ask for the root involved. They can give you a suffix and then play around that. Prefix, so apart from that, word origin. So they may give you a word, share the meaning with you, and then they'll ask you, okay, which language has it come from? Latin, Greek, Spanish, Italian, French, what? So such things. Then they have historically also given us word anagrams. They've tested our understanding using idioms and phrases. And this time around, in fact, they also had a couple of questions that checked our understanding of collective nouns. So, you know, a group of crows is called a murder. A group of lions is known as a pride. So you need to know your collective nouns. There were two questions which were actually based on collective nouns. And then, yes, you do also happen to have verbal ability, but most of the times when we say verbal ability, they're going to ask you parajumbles. Additionally, you may have something like a fill in the blank thrown in. Although last year there was a lot of vocabulary, there was very little grammar, and the rest of it was reading comprehension. So that's VARC for you. Now I've already told you what you need to do for grammar. For vocabulary, again, I'd suggest that you start taking out at least 20 minutes every day so that you can go on to excel in this particular area. Moving on, they have this section called Quant reasoning. It's mostly quant with a few reasoning questions thrown in. So as usual, just like the CAT, you should expect a lot of arithmetic questions in this particular exam. And when I say arithmetic, we are once again talking about things like percentages, simple and compound interest, ratio proportion, time and work, time, speed, distance. Okay, so mostly these things. Then so typically you should expect to get around 8 to 10 questions from arithmetic. Thereafter, you get these questions that are based on algebra. So algebra, once again, you'd have functions, equations, inequalities. So such topics usually contribute majority of the questions for you. Then you should have geometry and mensuration. So essentially lines, angles, triangles, polygons, circles, squares, rectangles. They can also get into three-dimensional figures, okay? So cylinders, cones, spheres, all of that. So all of these things are typically covered. Then you have some questions from modern maths, predominantly probability. Thereafter, clocks and calendars typically is asked in the quant section here. And then you can also have questions from number system. So integers, logarithms, okay, so integers, logs, etc. primarily are HCF, LCM based questions. Those kind of questions are the ones that we expect in quant. But when it comes to quant, I'd say difficulty is usually lower. But in terms of the syllabus, you don't really have to do something additional. Just make sure that you go on and become better at calculations though. Okay. Then you have DILR. Now, if I look at last year, last year's DILR basically had a lot of tables, some bar charts and some pie charts, along with some seating arrangement questions. That basically formed the major crux, the major chunk of the section. But then historically, if you go back, you'd see you'd have a lot of questions based on coding, decoding, questions that test your understanding of blood relations, sets and Venn diagrams, quite a few questions from games and tournaments, along with, let's not forget, syllogisms, which can at times contribute as high as 5 to 6 questions. So focus more on these areas. Otherwise, when it comes to DI, you realize you're still working on more or less the same things that you work on for quant: bar graph, tables, line graph, bar chart, pie chart, set theory, etc. And for logic and DI as well, linear and circular arrangements are important, series, matrix type questions. So more or less the same thing that you cover for the CAT. Though the difficulty level in this particular section varies. There have been years when it is easy, there have been years when it has been tougher. Last year was one of those unusual areas where we did not have much of conventional analytical reasoning. And then you have this section on general awareness, and in this section expect questions based on static GK as well as current affairs, which is also known as dynamic GK. So static GK are those aspects of GK that do not change: history, inventions, books and authors, right? So geography, those kind of things. Current affairs are obviously all about the recent happenings, and because the program that they offer is international business, you know the kind of leaning that this particular section will have. So usually you do find questions from both of these areas, but their weightage keeps on changing, right? So there is no guarantee that you'd have the exact same weightage. So last year was a fairly even mix, but a year prior to that, static GK went on the higher side. In fact, I remember when I wrote the IIFT exam, when I was an aspirant, man, the entire general awareness section was full of history questions, and I knew so little of it. So that became a real challenge when it came to answering those questions. So make sure that you don't make the mistake that I made, and that you go ahead and prepare for it more holistically. So this is the syllabus, but then what kind of performance is expected? What are those cutoffs? So first up, let's talk about call cutoffs. So you know that in IIFT we have sectional cutoffs. So if your score is below that sectional cutoff, you are obviously not going to be considered for final selection. So let me first and foremost talk about those sectional and overall cutoffs. You know, the minimum number of marks that you need to get in order to be considered by the IIFT. Okay, so here it is. So in quantitative reasoning, the total marks were 75. You needed to score 8 last year. In VARC, and I'm talking about IIFT 22, which was meant for the batch starting in 23. Then in VARC, the sectional cutoff was 11, primarily because it had a lot of vocabulary based questions which were difficult. A year before that, the sectional cutoff for VARC was around 19. So it all depends on the difficulty level of the exam, and they usually set it around 40 percentile. So roughly around 40 percentile. In DILR, the sectional cutoff this time around was 14, a year prior was 13. General awareness, this time around the sectional cutoff was 4.5. So one question is 1.5 marks. In order to get 4.5, you barely needed to attempt 4 or 5 questions. So even if you're somebody who's like, oh, general awareness, how would I go about doing it? Well, in order to clear the sectional cutoff, I think even if you're just reasonably good, you should definitely be on the safer side. And the overall cutoff was in the vicinity of 43. And when I say overall cutoff, I'm talking about the minimum marks required. So less than that, and they'll not even consider you. So what is the actual cutoff at which you get a call from IIFT? Well, this is where things get a little murky. Why do they get murky? The call from IIFT for the subsequent round does not depend just on your IIFT score. It depends on multiple factors. So what are those multiple factors? Let's have a look at those factors as well. So here you go. So let us say that they need to give you 100 marks. So out of those 100, 73 marks are given to the IIFT exam. So in a way, your IIFT exam has a 73% weightage when it comes to getting a call for the next round. Then 10% weightage is given to your 10th score, another 10% given to your 12th. Then you have 5 marks for academic diversity, 2 marks for gender diversity. So let's talk about the non-IIFT related things first. So 10th and 12th, anybody who has scored more than 90% is going to get 10 marks, right? But what if you are somebody who has scored between 80 and 90%? You're going to get 8 marks. And similarly, 70 to 80 will be 5 marks, so on and so forth. You can actually look it up. So imagine somebody who has scored more than 90% in 10th and 12th. So he has already managed to get these 20 marks. Then academic diversity. All it means is if you're an engineer, you'll get a 0. If you are a non-engineer, you'll get 5 marks. So if somebody is a non-engineer, that person has already gotten 5 marks. Then gender diversity. If you're a male, 0. If you're a female, 2. So there is a girl student. You get another 2. So if there is a girl student who is not an engineer and has scored more than 90% in 10th and 12th, she already has 27 marks, and the remaining 73 depend on IIFT. So even if her score in IIFT is a little on the lower side, she'll still end up getting a call. Okay, and therefore I think predicting the exact number of marks at which you expect a call from IIFT will be different. But last year, if I look at the data, but if I talk in terms of percentiles, I'd say around 98 percentile is what is going to be a sound score, provided you have decent profile, decent score in these other 4 areas. So for general category, the cutoff last year was 52.75 marks in IIFT exam. Now you'd suddenly tell me that Vikrant, 300 marks paper and I need to get just 52.75. No, it is a 300 mark paper, but the total score that you have is scaled down to 73. So roughly put, you are basically reducing it by 1/4. Okay, and therefore when I say cutoff of 52.75, it is out of 73. So once again, roughly put, we are talking about a score of around 208, 210, right? So that's the kind of thing that you need to keep in mind while targeting. Now, does that mean that you actually start targeting 98 percentile? Not really. See, you know, this is just the call criteria. IIFT also happens to have a selection criteria on the basis of which the final call, the final offer letter is issued. So in the selection criteria, the IIFT exam score receives 45% weightage. So scoring more marks here is going to be useful even subsequently. Okay, and then there are some, apart from academic and gender diversity, they'd also give you some marks for work experience, etc. later on. But 40% of the weightage will be for the next round, personal interview, VAT and all. Okay, so make sure that you try to maximize your IIFT score no matter what. And how do you go on to maximize it? Very simple, very straightforward. First up, start focusing on the new areas. So one new area very clearly is general awareness. Okay, so make sure that you start following current affairs religiously. So you get a lot of resources which talk about the month at a glance from the perspective of all of these aptitude exams. So normally the month at the glance will be around 30-40 pages. So every month, make sure that you go through that resource. Okay, and then start working a bit more on static GK. You can start with history, inventions, books and authors, etc. and then build it up from there. So maybe if you set a target of reading around 100 pages of static GK every month, you should be really very well prepared by the time these exams arrive. And then the other new area is grammar. In case you haven't started working on grammar, please do that. Yet another new area will be vocabulary. And then within analytical reasoning, maybe there are some areas that you don't focus on, things like blood relations, things like coding, decoding, because they usually do not get asked in the CAT exam. So make sure that you do focus on things like syllogisms, coding, decoding, blood relations, etc., and master these to the requisite level. Thereafter, for grammar specifically, if you want to cover those basics, parts of speech, type of sentence, etc., you can consider taking a subscription of BYJU'S Exam Prep, where we have given you more than 300 recorded lectures. Within those 300 recorded lectures, quite a few of them focus on the basics of grammar. So you want to learn about things like subject and object and adjective phrase and adverbial clause and different parts of speech. That's as good as it gets. Go through those 25-30 hours and you'd be in a really sound position to answer all of those grammar basics questions. Then do not forget to write mock IIFT exams. You can find quite a few of those on BYJU'S Exam Prep app eventually. And after writing every exam, analyze your performance ruthlessly. See, so basically when you analyze, what do you see? There are two types of questions. Questions that you attempted, questions that you did not attempt. Then the questions that you attempted, you could have gotten them right, you could have gotten them wrong. So the ones that you could get wrong, you think of why they went wrong. Then the questions that you could not attempt, you think of why could I not attempt those, and then come up with a strategy that ensures that you are able to increase your number of attempts and your accuracy over the course of next 7, 8, 10 days, and then you sit and write another exam. And on the basis of that analysis, whichever areas appear or come out to be your areas of discomfort are the areas that you go ahead and start working on. So that's pretty obvious, right? And despite the fact that it is pretty obvious, a lot of people miss out on it. And let us not forget that you also need to fine-tune your test-taking strategy. 2-hour exam with 110 questions, no sectional time limit. That requires a different approach altogether. So you need to be more aware of your strengths. You need to look at a question and figure out at a glance whether this belongs to something from an area of strength or not. And that's how that question selection becomes really very important. So work along those lines so that your test-taking strategy becomes excellent. And if you do these things, I am sure you'll end up getting a great score in IIFT and you'd perform exceedingly well. Right? So here is a thought for you from a great thinker and a leadership coach called Marshall Gans. Hope is the belief in the probability of the possible rather than the necessity of the probable. I'm not even going to explain it to you. Let's use it as a sentence whose interpretation will strengthen your reading comprehension skills, right? So think it over and tell me how it goes. Now, if you want to practice some questions straight away, you can head over to BYJU'S Exam Prep app, where we upload a new sectional quiz every day. Additionally, we have a series called 500 Most Expected CAT Questions, where we pick up one section and take you through some questions of that area. In fact, at 3 today, Gaurav sir is taking you through some quant questions in this session, so you can definitely join him and attend. Additionally, if you want some inputs related to strategy, register for this session and benefit. Besides, if you want to be among these toppers who are from our classroom programs, you too can join us and work together with some of the most elite, most loved teachers in the country, right? So that's it from me today. Make sure that you do like this video, share this video to those that you think can benefit from it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that's it from me today. Until I see you next, stay safe, stay focused, stay in touch. Have a great day ahead, and I look forward to meeting you soon. Take care.